Yep, that's the idea. Okay, so Zoom folks, do you see my screen that says musical texture?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, good deal. All right, let's go ahead and get rolling. So this is the wrap up of our vocab terms, and the test is next week at 6:30 on Tuesday. If you have questions about how to take that, please let me know. You will need a device that is capable of opening a Google form, because that's how you will record your answers. The questions themselves will be presented either on screen here or on screen for you, shared. So you'll need a device that's capable of opening that Google form so that you can record your answers as we go.
So will we be doing the test like during this Zoom?
Yes.
And then I can zoom in and then open the Google form on my same device?
You should be able to if you can open multiple, like.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that should work.
Okay.
Okay, so we're starting this chapters 5 through 8, and full disclosure, there's one word on the vocab list that's actually at the very beginning of chapter 9. I don't know if that's a difference from the old edition of the book to the new edition of the book, but when I started finishing this up, I went, huh, that's chapter 9. And I thought it stopped at chapter 8, but that's okay. So it'll all work out. So first we're talking about musical textures. Monophonic texture has only one melodic line. It's the simplest type of texture. When a little kid sings you, Mary Had a Little Lamb, that's monophonic texture. Because they're probably not going to be accompanied by anything. They're just going to sing. If I sit down at the piano and I play with one hand and I just play one line of music with no harmony at all, that's monophonic texture. So mono meaning one, and phonic meaning sound, monophonic, one sound.
The words we use to talk about texture are sometimes a little bit complicated and daunting, but they're much easier to remember if we work out what the words actually mean. So the first type of texture that we're going to have a look at is something called a monophonic texture. And there you go, that's an example of one of these slightly long and daunting words that we will come up against when we look at texture in music. So what does monophonic mean exactly? Well, let's break this down into two chunks. Let's look at first mono. Now, mono means, just like mono sound, if you remember, well, maybe you don't remember, but before stereo, before Dolby surround sound, we used to have mono, and that meant that there was one source of sound coming to you, and that's what mono means. It means one. And the other part of the word, this phonic bit, this bit here, just like telephone, phonic means sound. So if we put these two bits together, monophonic really means one sound. A monophonic texture is probably one of the simplest textures that we're going to come across in any type of music, because just as the name suggests, it's made up of one sound or one melody. And so, say someone was singing a simple song by themselves or playing a tune on a flute or a violin, chances are the music they would be creating would be monophonic. In other words, the music only has one strand that we can grasp onto. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a soloist. We could have lots of different people singing the same thing, and that would also be monophonic as a texture. Some of the earliest music is monophonic. If we think back to how music really got started, it was mostly monks chanting to mark important moments in religious services and special times of the religious calendar. And the way they would do this would be to use a very simple chant melody to sing some important text from scripture. Now, as time moved on, composers wanted to break away from just having such a simple monophonic texture to their music, and they wanted to start to add other things into the mixture. Once we start doing that, we end up with some different textures.
which we'll talk about momentarily,
The words we used,
like polyphonic. Polyphonic is more than one melodic line combined. They can work together in kind of in tandem and make pleasant harmonic sound, consonants, or they can work against each other and make less pleasant sound, dissonance. But if there are two melodic lines that are combined, two distinct musical ideas or lines, that's polyphonic texture. Poly meaning many, phonic meaning sound, polyphonic. Here's an example of some easy polyphonic sound. This is often how we teach kids to sing harmony for the very first time. When they're quite young, it can be difficult to teach them to sing like in thirds, sing an alto line and a soprano line that move in tandem. So we use what we call partner songs, where you have a Skip to My Lou song and you have the Paw Paw Patch song, and then you sing them at the same time. So this is a melodic line, and this is a melodic line, and then you put them together and you have polyphony. If I just sang Skip to My Lou, that would be monophonic. If I just sang the Paw Paw Patch, that would be monophonic. But when I put them together, boom, I've got instant harmony, I've got polyphony, I've got polyphonic sound. Feel free to sing along. You put them together, and you've got polyphony. They pronounce pawpaw much differently than I pronounce pawpaw. And then you have homophonic texture, which is a melody that stands out, which is accompanied by chords that are in the background. So if you look at the picture I've chosen here, you see the thorny, maybe a rose stem. It's hard to tell because we're so close. That's in the foreground, and then in the background, it's kind of hard to tell what's back there. It's less prominent than what's in the foreground. So this thorny stem would be like the melody, and this less distinct, more nebulous stuff back here would be the accompanying chords. Here's an example of a very familiar to those of us that study music, Italian aria Caro mio ben. We kind of call it the freshman sing-along song, because if you're a freshman voice major, you're gonna sing this song in your lessons. And so this gentleman, who is a tenor, is going to sing the melody, and this gentleman back here is going to accompany him on the piano. Piano player everybody sings. So we have a prominent melody accompanied by the chords on the piano to give it harmonic support. That was very nice. Yeah, yeah, I'm sure you've sung that before. Yes. Yep, that is a very familiar song. So those are the types of texture you'll need to know about: homophonic, polyphonic, and monophonic. Which brings us to musical form. Musical form is how musical pieces are constructed. Form is the organizing principle in music. It can be simple, it can be complex. Strophic form is repeating the same melody over and over with no, the words can change, but the notes themselves do not change. A good example of this is the nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Today, we're doing nursery rhymes. Nursery rhyme. Oh yes.
Bravo for the pig. So Mary Had a Little Lamb. The first stanza and the second stanza have exactly the same melodic structure. The words change, but the notes themselves do not change. So that's strophic form. It's identical from verse to verse. No, okay. Through composed music does not repeat. And when I looked up through composed music, this is the example they gave me because I really wanted something else. And I'm not sure that I'm in complete agreement with this because there are some ideas that come back as you go through this, but if you write a poem, you take a poem and you set that poem to music, as you move through the poetic text and you never come back to what you did earlier, if it goes on and on and on without ever coming back to something from earlier, that would be through composed. This is the least common musical form. Simply because our ear kind of craves that coming back to the A section where we started. We really want to come back home to that home base. And through composed music doesn't really do that. This is Earl King by Schubert. It's based on a poem by Goethe. Schubert was a romantic composer, and they like everything dark, dark and macabre. So this is pretty dark and it's pretty macabre, but it is an example of through composed music with the twist. The Earl King is the king of the elves. So this is the Earl King speaking now. So the Mein Vater comes back again, but every time it's in a slightly higher range, it goes up. So it is through compose, even though you hear those ideas come back again. Remember that through compose is the least common form you're gonna hear, just because we want to hear that resolution, we want to hear that coming back to what we sang before, what we heard before, what we played before. So through composed music is not as common as the other types of forms we're going to talk about. Binary form has two parts, A and B. Here's an example of binary form. Before I play it, let's just talk about it. Here's the A section, and it repeats. And then here's the B section, and it repeats. So A and B. There's going to be a change in tonality. We're going to go from an F major tonality here to a C major tonality here. And then we have the relative minor of D minor here. So you're going to hear some change, some not quite instability, but some monkeying around with the key, to put it lightly. Here's the repeats. This was very common in Handel's time. This is from Handel's water music. A hornpipe is a type of dance. And when we get to the Baroque, the Renaissance and the Baroque, we'll talk about how dance forms like hornpipes, waltzes, minuets were very important in building larger pieces of music, larger works. But what's important here is that there's an A section and then a differing B section. You can hear the difference. Ternary form is ABA. We're finally going to get to return to what we did at the beginning. So we're going to have an A section, a differing B section, and then it's going to come back to the A section. It returns. This is often, if you're familiar with church hymns, this is what we hear in our church hymns: an A, a verse, the chorus or refrain, and then another verse. So ABA. We return from whence we came. Oh, I spelled ternary wrong. I just realized. Sorry. Just kind of giving you the breakdown of what we're going to hear. Here's the B section. The melody is mutual lower hands. You heard the beginning. They had just a little extra curly Q there on the end. So ternary, sorry, there should be an R right here. I did not proofread. Ternary form is A, B, A. It's gonna return to the material from the beginning of the song at the end again. Improvisation is when you make it up on the spot. This is a very important feature in jazz music, but it's been around much longer than that. Composers like Mozart and Bach were very well known for their ability to improvise. Bach could improvise entire fugues on the organ. And when we talk about fugues, you'll see how amazing that is. He could make it up on the spot. Mozart could do that too. And here is a little apocryphal story from the movie Amadeus, which is based on the life of Mozart. And is not, as movies often are, is not entirely true. But this is Mozart improvising on a melody that was written for him by another composer named Salieri. This is Salieri writing his little march.
Grazie, Signore. Your Majesty, I hope you won't find it improper, but I've written a little marching platform in his honor.
What a charming idea. I see.
The platform is
Can I try it?
Majesty.
I Paul Corker, composer. May I play it when it comes in?
You're doing too much honor, sorry.
Bring in hand Mozart, please. But slowly, slowly. Get a bit right.
Excellent.
Your Majesty. I beg you.
Majesty.
Ah, no, please, please. It's not a holy relic. Herr Salieri composed this little march of welcome for you.
Grazie, Signore. Sono commosso.
It's yours.
Keep it, Majesty, if you want. It's already feeling like that.
What? From one hearing only?
Think so, sire?
Yes. Show us.
Stay. Doesn't work, does it? Hi. Did any of you want this? This. Yes. Grazie.
Ostinato is a pattern that repeats. It can be a melodic pattern, it can be a rhythmic pattern. And once you've seen this video, you will never, ever, 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 ever forget what an ostinato is. Guaranteed.
An ostinato is a pattern that repeats. An ostinato is a pattern that repeats.
What?
An ostinato is a pattern that repeats. 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 An ostinato is a pattern we play that always stays the same. You take a quick company songs. The Italians gave it its name. You can play it on the drum set. Or you can play it on the synth. If anyone asks you what it is, explain it like this. An ostinato is a pattern that repeats. 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 Ostinatos, we really play long and short sounds. Steady beat is different, but it's just pound, 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 pounds. But ostinatos change things up, yet somehow stay the same. Because we play them over and over and over and over and over again. An ostinato is a pattern that repeats. 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 Ostinato is a pattern that repeats. An ostinato is a pattern that repeats.
You'll never forget what an ostinato is, even if you try. Ostinatos can be used to tie pieces together, longer pieces together, and it's a component like a Lego, like a building block that you can use. You can put the ostinato in the upper voice, you can move it to the lower voice, and it's still that same pattern, but it gets moved. It can get moved around within the piece to kind of tie the whole thing together. A movement is a smaller section of a larger work. If you look at the picture that I have here, it has four pieces, but you put it all together and you get the full picture. This is like an individual movement. This becomes really important in the Renaissance. And the movements were usually different dances in the Renaissance. You'd have a minuet and you'd have a passacaglia, and you'd have, oh, I just went completely blank. Let's just say a waltz and a hornpipe. And those were all related by key or by theme. And they were all one larger piece. This will continue to develop in the Baroque, and it will reach its zenith in the classical period with the symphonies of Mozart and Beethoven. But these individual little components, little pieces, are the movements. There were rules and regulations about what you could and could not do with movements in the Renaissance and in the early Baroque. But Mozart is going to come along and start to kind of muddy those waters, and then Beethoven's going to blow that completely up, because that's what Beethoven was all about, was blowing stuff up. So he's going to take the rules and say, yeah, those rules don't apply to me, because he didn't much believe in the rules applying to him. And he will change how movements work and how symphonies are built by the time he comes along. But what you need to know is that movements are the smaller sections that make up a larger musical work. Tempo is the speed of the beat. It can be fast, it can be slow. It can change. Now remember the beat. The beat is the beat. The beat is the tomato, right? The beat doesn't change. But the tempo of the beat can change. The meter can change. And sometimes within a movement or a piece of music, the tempo will speed up or slow down, depending on what the composer is trying to convey. Tempo indications are usually written in Italian. Most musical terminology that we use is written in Italian, because they're the ones that kind of came up with the system. So traditionally, we have kept those Italian terms, even though as composers and musicians all over the world, we can use our own language too. But what's kind of cool about that is, if I went to Rome and I sat in on a rehearsal and they said adagio, I would know what that meant, because it's Italian and I've studied that. So by the time we get to the 20th century, and composers like Aaron Copland, he would use a combination of English and Italian. The Germans sometimes like to use German. You don't see the French do it quite as often, but most of the time, musical things like tempos and dynamics that we're going to talk about here in just a few minutes are written in Italian, and that's traditional, because the Italians were the ones that sort of formed the whole system, so we kept what they had to say. These are not the only tempo indications in the world. These are not the only ones, but these are some that are handy to know. Adagio means quite slow. Not as slow as grave. I didn't put grave here, which is spelled like grave. And if you think of, somebody who is in a grave is not moving very fast at all. Adagio is there's a little more movement than grave. Then andante is a walking pace. I've never liked this description, because my walking pace and your walking pace are probably not the same. But an andante tempo, you're not in a hurry, you're not rushing to get anywhere, you're just walking down the mall, right? Allegro, however, is fast and cheerful. Now you're in more of a hurry. It's lunchtime and you're gonna go have lunch. So you're in a bit more of a hurry, you're going someplace with purpose. And then presto is very fast. Now, like I said, this is not, there's also vivace, which would probably fit right in here, which is vigorous, a little faster than allegro, not quite as fast as presto. These do have specific metronomic markings, but that's not important. At the beginning of the ostinato video, that device that was clicking back and forth, that's called a metronome. We have them on our phones now. They even make them that you can wear on your wrist like a watch, which is pretty cool. And metronomes have, for hundreds of years, helped us keep our tempos straight. And these all have specific metronomic markings, but you don't need to know that. You just need to know that adagio is slower than allegro and presto is faster than andante. You just need to know that. When we want to change the tempo, we can use these two terms. We can use accelerando, which means to gradually speed up. You know, accel right here, that looks like accelerator in your car. If you want to go faster, you step on the accelerator, right? And you go faster. And then retardando means to gradually slow down. You don't want to step on your brake really hard and come to a complete stop immediately. That's bad on your brakes and bad on the people behind you. So you gradually slow down. So remember that accelerando is like accelerator, and you won't get those mixed up. These can also be abbreviated. ACCEL or RIT are the common abbreviations for those. Because sometimes in a musical score, you just don't have room to write out accelerando or retardando. You need to make it shorter so it'll fit better. Dynamics are loud and soft, and the changes between loud and soft in music. Notice I did not say high and low. High and low refers to pitch, not to dynamics. Dynamic indications are usually abbreviated, but they are based on Italian terms. For instance, this italicized P is piano, which is Italian for soft. This italicized F is forte, which is Italian for loud. The very first keyboard instruments that we now call pianos were actually called pianofortes. That was their full name, because they were one of the first instruments that was capable of playing both loud and soft without making major structural changes to the instrument itself. And over time, we kind of dropped the forte part and just called it a piano. But its full name was pianoforte. This M stands for mezzo, which is Italian for medium. You will never see the M by itself because it doesn't mean anything by itself. Medium what? Medium shirt, medium pizza. It's a modifier. So the M has to be coupled with something. So if we put the M with the P, we get medium, soft, mezzo, piano. If we put the M with the F for forte, we get mezzo, forte, medium, loud. If I had my druthers, if I was queen of the world, I would get rid of mezzo piano and mezzo forte altogether because it's so unspecific. And it can be really hard to judge, is that a true mezzo piano? I don't know. You have to compare it to this and to this to know whether or not this is valid. So I would probably just get rid of those altogether. Often these occur when you are getting louder or softer. And it kind of happens in between. If we start at piano, we're trying to work our way to forte, we're probably going to pass through both of these dynamic levels on our way from here to here. If I put two P's together, I get pianissimo, which is very soft. If I put two F's together, I get fortissimo, which is very loud. Issimo is Italian for very. So loud very. Soft very, loud very. When I want to change dynamics, I can use these symbols. This top one is a crescendo. It means to gradually get louder. And if you look at it visually, it goes from small to larger, from small sound to big sound, crescendo. And then its opposite is the decrescendo, to gradually get softer. It goes from big sound to small sound visually. These are also often abbreviated by CRESC period for crescendo and DECRESC for decrescendo. And it can be confusing because sometimes they'll put this in the music and sometimes they'll put this in the music. Pick one and stick to it. It would be nice if they did, but they often don't. Again, it's often a matter of space. It's just practicality and how much can you fit into the music on the page and make it not look cluttered. There are two basic genres or categories of music. There's sacred music, which is religious in nature. And then there's secular or non-religious music. In Western music, our earliest preserved musical examples are did I say secular? It should be sacred. I can't believe I did that. Strike that, reverse it. I was typing this in a dark room with 8th graders watching a video, so I just mistyped that. In Western music, our earliest preserved musical examples are sacred because of the influence and power of the Catholic Church. And we'll talk about that very soon when we start talking about musical history periods. But this should say sacred, not secular. I can't believe I made a mistake. When we use text in vocal music, the word text means the words that you are singing. There are three major kinds of textural treatment. One is syllabic, where you have one word or syllable per note, like Mary Had a Little Lamb, which Peppa Pig sang for us so nicely earlier. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. So one note per word or syllable. Melismatic is when you have a bunch of notes on a word or syllable. A lot of people, when they perform the Star-Spangled Banner, especially at sporting events, tend to get very melismatic. And they stretch out words or syllables of words, and it becomes very decorated and sometimes almost unrecognizable as a tune, and that's melismatic. Pneumatic is a few notes, 2, maybe 3 per word or syllable.
I want to just talk about two types of singing: melismatic and syllabic. Syllabic singing means one note per syllable. So if I sing a song like
And then here's an example of pneumatic. This is from the song America, which hopefully you're familiar with. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. So every and let are pneumatic textural treatment, because we've got the first syllable of every has 2 notes. The second syllable of every has 2 notes, and then let has 2 notes. This little curved line here is called a slur. And this indicates, when we see it in vocal music, this indicates that there's going to be more than one syllable or more than one note on this syllable. So if you look at from, mountain, side, that's syllabic. From, mountain, side, free, dumb, ring. So here you see syllabic and pneumatic textural treatment. Timbre is tone color. Timbre is why instruments or voices sound the way they sound. Lots of factors can influence timbre. The materials that an instrument is made from, the size of the instrument, the age of the instrument or the voice, and the manner of sound production. Like percussion instruments, you hit or strike. Instruments like the violin, you use a bow to pull across the strings to create the vibration. Flutes don't sound like tubas for a reason, okay? Flutes are very small, tubas are very big, so even though they're both made of metal, they're not gonna sound the same because of timbre.
Timbre. Another word for timbre is tone. Timbre is the distinguishing characteristic that differentiates one sound from another, despite the fact that they might be playing the same frequency with the same amplitude. When we're describing a sound's timbre, we use words like sharp, round, reedy, brassy, or bright to describe them. Let's correlate timbre to flavor. Think of apples. They're a type of fruit that has a typical shape, color, and flavor, but inside the category of apples, there's a huge amount of variation. Some apples are very sweet, while others are more sour. Some are red, while others are green. They're all still apples, but each one with a distinct characteristic. Red Delicious is different from Macintosh, is different from Gala, is different from Honeycrisp. Even when describing one type, there might be variations from apple to apple. Same thing goes for sound sources. One category of timbre we use quite often is strings. Inside of the string family, we have violins, violas, cellos, and double basses. They have similar timbres and tones in some ways, but each one is distinct. When comparing two different violins, one might have a very bright sound while the other is more muted and dark. Even when playing one violin, we can produce different timbres by bowing a different way.
This also applies to voice types. There are 4 major voice types. There's soprano, which is the highest, usually female voice. There's alto, which is the lower, usually female voice. There's tenor, which is the higher, usually male voice, and then bass, which is the lowest, usually male voice. Now, when a boy is prepubescent, before he has gone through puberty, he is probably going to sing either soprano or alto. But then after he goes through puberty and he experiences a voice change, he could be a tenor or a bass. Women go through a voice change too, but it's not as dramatic as what guys go through. We don't usually get all the voice cracking and that kind of stuff, but we still have to learn to control our instrument, and our voice will settle into usually a soprano or an alto range. That's why I teach middle school choir, and I try to be very careful about not labeling young female voices too soon as a soprano or an alto, because they're not really going to know until later high school or maybe even their early college years what their voice type really is, because they haven't settled yet. Boys who start out as sopranos often end up as basses. It's just how it works. So when my son was a boy, he loved to sing soprano in the car with me, and then he would change his key because he thought that was funny. So he's 35 now, so he's definitely now a baritone. Word painting is when we use the music to convey or imitate the text. If you are singing a song about how happy you are, but the song is set in a minor key that sounds kind of sad or mysterious or dark, that's a weird way to paint that text. If the text is about I'm so happy, but the minor key doesn't really fit that, that's not a good example of text painting. Generally, if we're singing about being happy, it's going to be in a major key. and it's gonna be a faster tempo. So word painting is using the music to get across what the composer wants the words to tell you. Composers don't always write their own texts, right? We borrow texts, like we heard the Goethe text earlier that Schubert had set for Erlking. They take texts and then they try to convey what the words are saying through the music that they write.
Think about it. We take about it. Don't think about it. Take every time. Don't let it wait.
So those are some examples of word painting or text painting from current music. But this has been around for a very long time. It can happen too in instrumental music, but you don't have the text there to imitate. But when we listen to Vivaldi's Four Seasons, Vivaldi was known for his tone painting. We call that tone painting when words are not involved. Like in the Four Seasons, there's a movement for each season of the year. And in the winter movement, you can hear people slipping on the ice, which I think is really kind of clever. So that brings us to the end of our vocab list. If you go through your list and you find that I left anything out, I don't think I did, but if I did, please let me know, and I'll be sure that does not end up on the test. The test is next Tuesday at 6:30. You can take it online, but you should try to take it at the campus location nearest to you. If you usually Zoom in from Potosi, for instance, you can take it from there at 6:30, that would be just fine. You will need a device that is capable of opening a Google form, because that's how you'll record your answers. So, if you need a laptop or a tablet or whatever, if you can use Google form on your phone, that whatever you want to use. If you're at a campus location and you need to use the computer lab, that's something you might want to check into, because I don't know all the schedules of all the campus locations. So if you run into a problem, you need to let me know as soon as possible. If you cannot take the test next Tuesday at 6:30 from an on-campus location, please contact me soon to make arrangements to get it made up. You have 2 weeks to take the test, and after that you forfeit the points. So don't sleep on it, don't let it slip by you. We only meet once a week. So if you need to do it on a Tuesday, you only have 2 Tuesdays to get that done, and we're gonna move on in the meantime. So you don't wanna wait too long and let this stuff kind of get pushed to the back of your brain before you try to take this vocab test, because we're gonna move on. After we do the test next week, we are gonna go ahead with the next unit and start talking about instrument families and different tone qualities and colors. So you don't want to wait too long to get this done, because new information is gonna be coming in. Because I like to try to stay in the same basic place as the on-campus, main campus class, and they meet 3 times a week, or 2 times a week, where we only meet once a week. So we have to do things a little bit differently in order for us to stay where they are. For those of you that are watching the Zoom recording, this week's code word is Italian. This week's code word is Italian. So be sure and email that to me before next Monday at noon, so you can get credit for attendance, even though you're watching the Zoom recording instead of being with us live. As always, if you have questions, please shoot me an email. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. I try to check my email every day. Sometimes I don't get to it until later in the day, but I do try to look at it at least once a day, and I will do my very best to get back to you. Remember that the book that you're gonna need is the 14th edition, Enjoyment of Music, edition 14. So if you need the ISBN number for that, it is on the syllabus, but I can also send it to you via email if you need me to. And any questions from Zoomers or folks in the room?
I'm good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
No, ma'am, thank you.
Okay, then I will see you next Tuesday and we'll do our vocab test first thing. Have a good week.
You too.